4 themes have been chosen by the sponsors to be examined with the 5 representatives. And I'm going to do the first 2, and Patrick will fill you in on the next 2. First of all, we'd like to know from the representatives how we can, the industry and you, can work together to take advantage of what is an enormously full of potential sector. We've seen very clearly over the last few years how the public's craving for content, good content in every audiovisual field has grown, and Canadians have the talent and the voices to really exploit this opportunity and make Canadian television absolutely as wonderful and as internationally famous as it should be. So there are now 244,000 people employed in this industry. My guess is that by the end of the year, when COVID's over, we will easily have 300,000 and more to come. The second theme, we'd like to know how we can collaborate to make sure that Canadian voices and Canadian talent can work in Canada without having to leave to exploit their talent in some other countries. So we're looking for ideas from you as to how we can work together to get that done. Patrick?
Oui, bien évidemment, on a 4 thèmes importants ce soir. Le sujet numéro 1 pour commencer, c'est
Yes, indeed, we have 4 important themes tonight. And the first theme is the growth of broadcasting system in Canada that was studied with the Act C10 that was adopted at the Parliament but never went beyond. So we want to modify the legislative framework and going against the reduction of productions in Canada. The second theme is how can we promote the sustainability and growth of the Canadian content, offering more opportunities for creative talent here in the country. And the third theme is a more diversified and equitable industry. How can we put forth all of the issues regarding diversity and also the addition of the LGBTQ2 plus, and how can we show them more on screens? And then the sustainable duration and incentives. Can we have tax credits to compensate sustainable productions or certifications in Canada? How can we encourage productions to reduce their carbon and the gas emissions? And we will be discussing this with the Minister Guilbeault from the candidate at the election, and all of the other parties, Martin Champoux, candidate later for the Bloc Québécois, and the representative of Strathcona in Edmonton, and also Sydney Krolik for arts, culture, and heritage for the shadow. So these are all the persons that will give us a presentation of the position of their party. So back to you.
Thank you. Well, actually, it's going to be back to you, Patrick, because you are up first with our Liberal representative, Minister Guilbeault.
Bonsoir, Monsieur Guilbeault. Merci d'avoir accepté notre invitation ce soir, évidemment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Guilbeault. Thank you for accepting our invite tonight. The fact that the Bill C-10 did not go before the Senate, and we went directly through the start of the election. So what is your program, your plan, if you're re-elected next September 20th regarding broadcasting? So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you to all of you. And I'd like to mention that I am on the Mohawk territory, the Anishinaabe territory in Montreal, and I'd like to recognize this. And three things regarding your questions. The ones that are with us tonight know very well that we are the government that has tried for 30 years to modify the laws, and we've worked for a full year to introduce the Bill C-10 according to the yield recommendations. So for the ones who went to our electoral platforms on the questions of arts and culture, we'll see that the yield report is found there. So we've filed the C-10 bill. It went up to the Senate. It was not adopted, but we engaged ourselves to file a new version of the C-10 bill during the 101st day of a new mandate. And we believe that we should also modernize, just as we have to modernize the law on broadcasting, and we have to go forth with modernizing, for example, the use of internet, also as we do today, and through telefilm, through the National Bureau of Films and the media funds, we need them to have the necessary tools in order to support our creators, males and females, are people that work in the audiovisual environment in a world that is amidst of the 21st century and has changed in the past 2-3 years. So we also want to increase the support from the government to this sector. So we engage ourselves to increase the funding to telefilm by 50 million over a 3-year period on our platform. We also commit to double the media funds for Canada over the 3 next years. And also, we're the first government in our Canadian history to set up a bureau for Aboriginal productions and offer 40 million in the first budget were offered, and we committed to continue with 13 million yearly every year for the Aboriginal. So how do you plan this? Do you have, for example, any documents on the GAFA, and also you have a second parallel discussion that is taking place on the content online? Are there any other parallel projects if you are elected next September 20th? Yes, absolutely. We want to file the other bills on the roles of GAFA in media, equitable compensation. We're talking about Facebook and Google, of course, and we're offering on our platform to inspire ourselves from the Australian model. We have to adapt it. We're not Australia. We cannot really just adopt a model as such over here, but it is a very interesting model nonetheless. So we have to be careful. At times, we're talking about content that is considered as being prejudicial or harmful. We're not talking about contents that are, not the kind of content that we would like, but we would like to have better tools to fight against those harmful and damaging production, the sexual images without any consent from the parties, violence, and so on. So this is under the criminal code. So if physically we cannot do it, there's no reason why we cannot apply this on the virtual side. We have 3 minutes to talk about theme number 2, invest in the Canadian talent. How can we assure the promotion of perennial growth and giving more opportunity for Canadian talent under a Canadian perspective. Sorry if I repeat myself, but if we want to modernize the law, well, that generate more than $800 million yearly for the sector. Now, instead of doing this, we are reducing the funds by more than $1.3 million. So we will not have this if we move ahead with the modernization of the law. So, you know, let's figure out, we'll get like 20 to 25% for Quebec and for other productions throughout the country in French. So, the modernization of the broadcasting law, I cannot see how we can support the next generation of creators because we're going to be facing less and less funds available. So I believe that there is a fundamental difference with the fact that Canada is becoming a production branch for foreign productions. So, you know, we're losing the right to tell our own stories. Yeah. So I do not deny that the fact that we have lots of productions over here have a value in terms of job creation, but it's not the same as being able to tell our own stories, support our own creators. That is, beyond that, I think that there's something that we haven't done too often is to give and use the tools of the BDC, for example, Bank of Development in Canada. And I've talked to the Sorry, I was talking about the Canadian Bank of Development. So, you know, to dedicate amounts to the art of culture. So it's very difficult for entrepreneurs to find the kind of funding. If the Canadian Bank of Development finances everything, why not the entrepreneurs that we have?
Back to you for the questions in English. For the
Thank
last
you.
2 questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Our fourth theme was supposed to be the environment, but I think that you probably like to talk a bit very deeply about that. It's close to your heart. There is certainly a cleanup that needs to be done in our industry. We have been responsible for a lot of things that shouldn't happen in a climate changing environment to get a green environment. But now I see that the people in our industry are very seriously committed to environmental control and to emission control. How can we work with you specifically to make that happen in ways like you suggested the development bank as a way to help the industry? What is out there in your platform that can help us clean up our act?
Thank you for that question. It is one that is also very close to my heart, as is the support and well-being of the arts and culture sector in Canada. One of the things that fascinated me the most when I first started my role as Minister of Canadian Heritage and started meeting people from different sectors of the arts and culture across the country, was that the fact that people welcomed me by saying, my goodness, we're so happy to have an environmental activist as Heritage Minister for the very reasons that you outline. At first, I'm not an art expert. I mean, I'm certainly an enthusiast, but when the Prime Minister asked me to sit around the cabinet table and be the Canadian Heritage Minister, I was certainly honored, but my second thought was, you know, what am I going to do? And clearly, I connected very quickly with so many people because in many ways, artists and environmentalists are are very similar. They're very passionate people. They're very dedicated people, and they care deeply about the world we live in. And I think another characteristic that we share is that we don't necessarily see the world for what it is, but we see it for what it could be. Environmentalists in terms of sustainability, and artists in terms of the beauty and every way that, you know, sculptures and musicians and arts, other artists see the world. So we started working earlier on in looking how can the federal government accompany the sector in a greening strategy. And shortly before the election was called, I was happy to announce that we had created two advisory committee to the Ministry of Canadian Heritage, one for the greening of the arts and culture, and another one for the greening of the sports sector. And what I'm hoping we will be able to do with this is, one, as you rightly pointed out, there is a growing concern within the sector in terms of the footprint of the sector. And there's already a number of organizations, companies that have started looking at this, you know, what it is we can do in the music, in the audiovisual sector. There are organizations that have developed expertise that they can share. So I want to make sure that these resources are made available, but that also the federal government can help organizations who want to start transitioning to start reducing their environmental and carbon footprint. And the second area where I think we need to collaborate more is that the science of communicating on climate change has evolved a lot over the last few years. And basically what it tells us is that we've been communicating on climate change all wrong. Like, our communications have been based on very complicated things. We've been talking about, you know, severe weather events as if it would help, as if it would mobilize people to act. In fact, what we're seeing is that it doesn't mobilize them, it paralyzes them in fear. We've been using really complex concepts like percentages of emission reduction and 2030 and 2050. But what the science tells us is that we should be communicating from the heart. We should be communicating based on values. And I mean, as an activist, I certainly wasn't very good at doing that. I don't think I'm much better as a politician. Artists, on the other hand, are very good at doing this. And they have a way of doing this that no one else can do. And that's another thing that I've discovered over the last 18 months, is how many artists and arts organizations are out there who want to be part of this conversation on climate change, to help Canadians understand that we're all in this together. We all have a role to play, and certainly government have a very important role. And I'm not trying to put this on the public's shoulder. We have an important role to play, but we're all in this together, and we have together to find solutions and to work together. And I think artists can play a key role in helping us do that.
Thank you. You know, a greening economy is a greening world is a world that finds diversity precious. And human diversity is another thing that we wanted to talk to you about. Stories that are told by people who live them and who know them and understand both the funny parts and the difficult parts of their background. How can you work with us to make sure that these diverse voices have a chance, become part of our strength as content creators?
That's another really good question. And I will brag a little bit, but I'm very proud of what we've accomplished and what I have accomplished as Canadian Heritage Minister. The creation and funding of the Indigenous Screen Office, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. There's another really important thing we did when the pandemic hit, and we came up with the first tranche of emergency funding, the $500 million in the spring of 2020. We realized that there's a number of organizations we weren't speaking to. And without support from the federal government, these organizations would have a really hard time, and most of them probably wouldn't be able to make it through the pandemic. So we set aside 40% of the emergency funding to go to organizations that we at Canadian Heritage or the Canada Council or the Canada Media Fund or Telefilm, 40% organization that had never received funding from the federal government. First thing that it did, it made us realize there was a lot of people out there we weren't talking to, and we needed to change that. And we've made that now part of our programming, of our existing program funding. The other thing we started doing is who do we choose to represent the voices of Canadians on Canadian institutions? The nomination of Jesse Wente as head of the Canada Council for the Arts, the nomination of Aisha Khan as head of the Canadian Human Rights Museum, Mohamed Hashim as head of the Canadian Race Relation Foundation. So as a minister responsible for Canadian heritage, I oversaw the nomination of roughly 200 people in different government positions, crown corporations over the last 18 months. 30% of them self-identified as being BIPOC, 10% of them as Indigenous people, and 56%, 57% as women. And I think this is really key. Like, we can't keep nominating white guys over 50 in these key positions and hope that the decisions that are made are any different than the decisions that have been made over the last few decades. So this is a key element, I think. And perhaps the last thing I would want to say is we need to make a bigger place for diverse creators and storytellers within the CBC. CBC is a very powerful tool that we have in Canada, and I want to reaffirm the role of the public broadcaster in protecting and promoting diversity, and also French language and Francophone cultures in Quebec, but also across the country, and also to ensure that Indigenous voices and cultures are present on our screens and radios. And we are also committing to help the public broadcaster do that, to increase the CBC's budget by $400 million within the next 4 years.
Isn't that, as I recall your platform, not $400 million, and this is in response to a question that we have here, is mainly to get rid of ads, not to increase programming. Is that correct or not?
Well, it's a combination of things, but yes, we want to diminish ads for certain segment of what the CBC publishes, but we also want some of this money to be used to increase the diversity of the voices, of the stories that we see and hear on the CBC.
Are you critical of what the CBC has done so far in diversity?
No, that's really not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that we want to see more diversity. We need to help the CBC have more resources to be able to do it.
Well, thank you, Minister. You've really been very helpful in your answers.
Thank you very much.
Merci.